Hello, my name is Sam Robinson. This is the Calhoun High School Data Overview. This is for my Data Analysis for School Improvement class, semester fall 2016. This data overview is intended for teachers, staff, and other stakeholders at Calhoun High School, as well as anyone looking to gain some perspective into Calhoun High School through data. The purpose of this data overview is to gain perspective through the use of data. The overview is going to look at demographic data such as enrollment data, attendance, etc., school environment data as far as the CCRPI, and student achievement data, specifically looking at EOCTs and Milestone Assessments. The purpose is once again to provide insight and to initiate dialogue and discussion on the data presented. Hopefully this will be received with an open mind. This is not intended to question anyone's ability as a teacher or intended to place blame upon anyone, but simply just to gain perspective and insight into Calhoun High School. Calhoun High School is located in Northwest Georgia. It is the only school within the Calhoun City Schools District. Currently, there are 1,090 students enrolled at Calhoun High School. Minority population, almost 44% minority, 62% free and reduced lunch rate, and the last year's graduation rate, it was just released, was 96.8%. Looking at that graduation rate, when you look at Calhoun High School and you look at the percentage population, you see the economic disadvantage around 60%. Limited English proficiency is 14%, student disabilities 8%, and you see a 44% of minority students. When you look at this, you see that as a graduation rate, based on the minority population, the economic disadvantage, and limited English proficiency, that graduation rate is a pretty solid number. CCRPI is measured basically for college and career readiness, helps evaluate a school's ability to prepare students for post-secondary education and for the real world. It's gathered using multiple data points. You can see 2012 Calhoun CCRPI was a 78.9, and that has been trending downward since then, with 2014 being 69.5. Hopefully, after we go through this data overview, we're going to kind of look and see why it may be trending downward and why that score is what it is. When we look at Calhoun's enrollment numbers, this data is from 2011 to 2016. The number of students enrolled, you see from 2011 to 2016, there was a upward trend, the highest being between 2012 and 2014, and kind of bottoming out, kind of staying very standard around 2015 to 2016 from the year before. And that is actually when tuition was implemented at Calhoun High School as far as out-of-district students having to pay tuition. So you can see that it had a little bit of effect, not much of an increase from 2014 and 15 to 2015 and 16. And as we mentioned in the slides before, the current population is 1,090, so that number has actually gone down since then. So we would actually be looking at a trend going downward from last year's numbers. If you look at the enrollment by subgroup, this is the total number of students in each population. You see that white is a majority of the population at Calhoun High School. Hispanic numbers have been rising a little bit more drastically than the white population. The black population has been trending downward a little bit, and then the other population as well has been trending downward. Looking at the same graphic, but now looking at the percentage, you see the percentage of white students has gone down a little bit. The percentage of Hispanic students has been going up each year, just ever so slightly. And then the black population is remaining around the same, as well as the other population. And other populations are going to include, Asian, Pacific Islander, those who identify, multiracial. Those would be considered in that other subgroup. Here's a pie chart that kind of gives you the same data to kind of see where the white population is a majority, just ever so slightly, with 56%, and the Hispanic is the next largest with 33%. And you can see the minority population right around there at 44% of Calhoun High School. This next slide is going to look at the Calhoun High School withdrawal data. In the orange there, you're going to see the total number of withdrawals each year, and also in the gray is the number of dropouts, those who dropped out. And you look here at the data, once again, if we look at 2014, 2015, that's the year with the largest number of total withdrawal and number of dropouts. And once again, that may be due to the year that tuition was implemented. So you can see a large number of students withdrawing or dropping out from there. But the good thing is if you look at 2015-16, the most current year we have, the numbers have gone down, which is a good trend. The attendance report here, this is pulled off of SLDS. This gives you 10 years of attendance data. If you look here, the data is fairly consistent. The best year for attendance at Calhoun High School, 2010 and 2011, you can see the higher percentage of zero absences as long as 1 to 5 absences. 2015, 2016, you can see is one of the higher years in the last 10 years, with 31% of students having 10 or more absences. But the 1 to 5 absences is good. Zero absences of 5%. So you can see the data here showing that, while it is fairly consistent, you would like to see that number in red be a little less than 31%. This next slide we're going to look at is with student achievement data. This is going to look at EOCTs in the last 3 years, 2012 to 2014. This is a percent of students scoring on the meets or exceeds. And when you look at this data, these charts, it looks very good because it's fairly consistent across the board as far as the scoring. When you look at 2012, Math 2 in 2012 was the lowest scoring test that Calhoun High School had. But as far as meets and exceeds goes, the Calhoun High School the last 3 years has proven to have a pretty high meets and exceeds rate, especially in language arts and physical science. Math being one that's one of the lower end, along with biology and U.S. history. 2014 was a very good year based on the percentage of students that meets and exceeds, which we would hope to see that after having 2 other years of tests before that. This right here is going to look at, we're going to really start looking at each individual test, and we're going to mainly focus on American Lit, biology, U.S. history, and Math 2. And this slide is the 11th grade American Lit. This is the percentage of does not meet, meets, and exceeds. That's where students will rank after they take an EOCT. As you see in 2012, there's a large percentage of students who met the standard, not a large percentage that exceeds. When you look at 2013 and 2014, you'll see that while the meets percentage went down, the exceeds went up, which is what you'd like to see, is students moving from meets to exceeds. And also the number of does not meets went down. So American Lit for Calhoun High School was trending upward in those years. Over on the right-hand side, you're going to see Calhoun High School and state comparison on the American Literature EOCT. So in 2012, it was better than the state in the meets category, but the state was better with students exceeding on the test. In 2013, you see very similar scores. Calhoun gaining the edge in the exceeds category. And then in 2014, very consistent scores with the state, with Calhoun slightly being higher in the exceeds and a little bit lower in the meets. This slide is going to look at the subgroups and how the subgroups at Calhoun High School performed. On the left side, the spring 2013 American Lit EOCT. The total number of students who tested, 183. You can see the subgroup totals there. And when you look at 2013, the scores are fairly consistent as far as meets or exceeds on the test, with 97% white students meeting or exceeding, 91% Hispanic, and 93% the black students, and the other category only 63%. And then in 2014, you see the number of students tested, 238, whereas the number of Hispanics taking the test increased, the number of white students taking the test increased, the number of black students actually decreased, and you're going to see a decrease in the number of Hispanic students, percentage of students who met or exceeded the percentage of white students. Is a little bit of a gap there between the white and Hispanic. The others are fairly consistent with one another. Next test we'll look at is the 9th grade biology EOCT. You see in 2012, Calhoun High School, 53% of students met the standard, 19% exceeded. Those numbers it shifted a little bit. More students moved from METs to exceeds. And in 2014, you see a little bit of a decrease, a little bit of a drop in that, where the meets is still 48%, but the exceeds was down to 19%. Compared to the state, Calhoun High School has not performed as well in the exceeds category in any of those years, but has done well as far as the meets part. The percentage of students who met the standards, 53% compared to 43% in 2012, 43% to 39% in 2013, and 48% to 41% in 2014. The only difference being in the exceeds category, the state was better in all 3 years. The biology test by subgroup on the left side, we'll look at 2013. This is where you're going to see kind of a larger achievement gap. White students, 85% were in the meets or exceeds category. Hispanic students, only 62%, and the black students were 41%. You look at the testing, there was 281 students testing, and of those, there's a wide gap between the white students and the minority populations. In 2014, you see kind of the same trend. The other trend, the other is going to be a little bit different because there's so little, with 2 or 3 different categories being in the other, as far as Asian, Pacific Islander, multiracial being grouped into that category. But if we look at the white compared to the Hispanic and black populations, then you're going to see the same trend of a wide achievement gap. And actually, in the with the numbers being very similar in 2014 and 2013, the percentages are actually going down, which we did see that in the last graphic on the percentage of meets exceed at Calhoun High School. So as you can see in biology, the white students, the majority is testing better as far as meets and exceeds, and there's a large gap in there. U.S. History EOCT, the percentage results on that compare from year to year. The numbers are trending upwards. There's more people moving to the exceeds category, less in the does not meet. As far as comparison to the state between 2012 and 2014, you'll see there's some very, very similar scores. In 2012, the state obviously a little bit better in the exceeds category. In 2013, Calhoun High School performed better than the state average. In 2014, Calhoun High School more in the exceeds category and less in the does not meet, so you see performing better than the state in that year as well. The student percentage of meets or exceeds by subgroup, 2013 and 2014. The subgroups in the U.S. history, you see in 2013 over here on the left side, 187 students tested. There were 75% meets or exceeds in the other category, 60% in both the black and Hispanic, and 79% in the white population. So that's a 19% difference in percentage of students who met or exceeded on the U.S. History EOCT. In 2014, you'll see a gap between the white and Hispanic, but the black population actually, the percentage of students who meets and exceeds, and you can look here at the numbers, but out of 238 students tested, only 9 of those students were black. So while the percentage is the same, the number of students being tested is the number is fairly significant in the difference of people testing. The next slide we'll look at is the Math 2 EOCT results. On the left-hand side, we'll look at 2012 and 2013. This is about the time where the math curriculum seemed to be changing close to every year. So the 2012, when Calhoun High School took the test, 48% of students were in the meets category, 9% of the students were in exceeds. In 2013, the meets category increased to 64%, and there was a slight increase in the exceeds category at 10%. Over on the right side, we'll look at the CHS and the state comparison. In 2012, CHS performed better than the state by not much of a significant margin. 48% met, 9% exceeds, and the state was 45% met and 8 exceeds. And in 2013, CHS was 64% was in the meets category and 10% in the exceeds, while the state was only 52% in the meets category and 7% in the exceeds. If you look at the same test, Math 2 EOCT, by subgroups, you will see that the same thing that we've seen in other tests where the white population is outperforming both the Hispanic and the black. And in this one, there's a significant gap from 64% of students meeting or exceeding in the white population to 27% in the black population. And that was in 2012. In 2013, you'll see that that gap has been decreased, as the white population, 79% were in the meets or exceeds, and the black population increased to 73%. Hispanic population increased 65%. But if you look at the number of students tested in 2012, 191 students tested. In 2013, 252. The black population, actually less students testing in 2013, while the Hispanic population was increased the number of students tested, but also increased the percent of students who were in the meets or exceeds category on Math 2 EOCT. These next slides we'll look at the Milestone Assessments, the newest assessments passed down from the state. And these assessments, the 4 categories are Distinguished Learner, Proficient Learner, Developing Learner, and Beginning Learner. Distinguished being the highest and Beginning being the lowest category. This is a comparison of CHS in the state and the American Lit EOC milestone. In 2015, you'll see that the state had more distinguished learners. Calhoun High School had more proficient, with 32% being proficient. The state only had 30%. In 2016, you'll see that the distinguished percent of learners was identical, and Calhoun High School having more percentage of students fall into the proficient category than the state did. These are some charts here, some tables based on the 2-year comparison of the subgroups at Calhoun High School. On the left side is 2015. Here, if you look at these numbers, there are 64 students falling in proficient and 15 students in distinguished out of 152. And when you look at the other populations with Hispanic and the black, 0 students were in the distinguished category. And so you can see there's obviously a gap there between the white population and the minority populations in terms of number of students falling into proficient and distinguished. You'll see that exact same trend in the 2016 American Lit results on the right hand side. 84 white students and 84 in the proficient, 26 in distinguished, compared to 13 in proficient, distinguished for Hispanic, and 1 black student. Now the numbers of students testing are a lot less, but when you look at the numbers there, you see there's obviously a wide gap between the white population and the minority populations in terms of who's performing in the proficient and the distinguished. We'll also look at the biology like we did with the EOCT. You'll see that the state outperformed Calhoun High School as far as distinguished learners in 2015. Also had more learners in the proficient category. Calhoun High School had 45% of students in the beginning category in 2015. What you'll see in 2016 is those numbers decrease as far as the numbers of beginning learners, more numbers for Calhoun High School, more percentage moving into the proficient and developing, and a slight difference in the proficient and the distinguished learner, but still falling less than the distinguished percentage of the state average in 2016. Another table of the subgroups. Here you'll see, in 2015, the number of distinguished students 8 in the white population, 4 in the Hispanic, and 0 in the black and other category. So if we look over at proficient, you'll see that's kind of where the wider gap is, with 47 students falling in the proficient category for white population, 20 in Hispanic, 2 in black, and 2 in other. So once again, a gap there out of the number of students tested. In 2016, we saw an increase in the proficient, and the bulk of that increase coming from the white population. As you see here, the black population, only 2 students in proficient and 0 students in distinguished. Hispanic students, there's more testing, so there are more that fall into the proficient category and more that fall into the distinguished category, but those percentages would be quite less than what the white population did in proficient and distinguished. So once again, we're kind of seeing a trend of an achievement gap between the white population and the others. We look at the U.S. History Milestone. In 2015, the percentage of students in distinguished was the same. The state having more students in the proficient, and Calhoun High School having a larger number of students, percentage of students falling into the beginning category, 35% falling in beginning. In 2016, you'll see though that CHS performed better than the state in both the distinguished and proficient percentage of learners. Calhoun High School 16% in the distinguished category and 33% in proficient. So from that 1 year difference, you see Calhoun High School improving its scores and performing better than the state did. Here you're going to see kind of similar data as we have in the other tests, whereas there are a larger number of white students taking the test, but also they are maintaining their higher percentage falling into the proficient and the distinguished category. On the left side, in 2015, 41 students performed proficient, 24 in the distinguished, compared to in the Hispanic there was 12 proficient, 3 distinguished, and once again the black population only having 2 proficient and 0 students performing in the distinguished category. A little bit different numbers in 2016 on the right. Once again, the white population having a bulk of the percentage of students performing in the proficient distinguished, but we do see that the Hispanic population had more students in the proficient, and the black population had a student in the distinguished category, but still significantly less in terms of numbers and percentage of the white population. We're going to look at the Algebra 1 EOC. We only have data for 2016 on this, but this data speaks volumes. When you look at the percentage of distinguished students, Calhoun High School, 1% of the students taking the test were distinguished, compared to the state having 10%. Calhoun High School, more developing and more beginning percentage of students than compared to the state. If you look at this, is also, once again, you're looking at a changing curriculum. But just looking at the data, you can see that Calhoun High School did not perform as well as the state average. If we look at the number of students by subgroup, you'll see that 36 students in the white population performed in the proficient and distinguished category. If you look at the Hispanic population, 18 students proficient, and actually more students performed distinguished, even though it's only one more. There are more students performed in the distinguished. The black students, only 17 students. Out of those 17 students, 1 student performed in the proficient or distinguished category. So there's obviously a gap there. And then with the other category, you had 2 proficient and 0 distinguished. So once again, the majority of students testing being the white population, but still outperforming the minority populations in terms of numbers and percentages. Just a little summary, a little wrap up. The strengths of Calhoun High School: there's a high graduation rate despite high percentages of economically disadvantaged and English language learner. The population's above the state average on meets and exceeds on most all of the EOCT averages, which was good. The withdrawal numbers decreased in 2015-2016 from the previous year, and the milestones are trending upwards in ELA, science, and social. There's still some work to do. In the math categories, some weaknesses: you'll see that the attendance data show there's a high percentage of students missing 10 or more days, which is a problem. The CCRPI is on a downward trend, and I think if you'll see that based on these weaknesses, because the achievement gaps are so large, especially on the EOCT, between the white and minority populations in the areas of math and science. achievement gap even larger when you get to the EOC milestones. And in Algebra 1, the testing last year, well below the state average on that assessment. So you're going to see, that's some of the reasons why the CCRPI is on a downward trend. Just some things to provoke some thought. The first thing, that comes to mind as far as discussion is, obviously the achievement gap on state assessments is going to cause a low CCRPI. When you look at the subgroups and who's performing, we didn't even get into the students with disabilities or the gifted or the economically disadvantaged and those things. We're just looking at minority population. But you see there is a large achievement gap between the white population and the rest. When you look at that, though, you see there's all these achievement gaps, but the graduation rate seems to continue to go up. So, is that a curriculum issue? Is the curriculum not rigorous enough? Or is there grade inflation going on? Why are we able to graduate so many students yet have such a high achievement gap in our state assessments? The attendance data that obviously shows a high absence trend as far as 10 or plus more absences. Really needs to question, why are students missing school? Is there a checkout policy in place? What are the policies and procedures that need to be looked at to try to get that number down and get back to that year we looked at, 2010, 2011, where the attendance was the best year. What is Calhoun High School doing? What are we doing to ensure diverse populations are being addressed in areas of math and science? When you look at those test scores, those seem to be the largest gaps for our diverse populations, especially when you look at Hispanic and the black populations. There's obviously something going on that's causing those students to not perform well or as well as the majority population. And to me, probably the biggest take from this, when I started this data overview, I thought with such a large Hispanic population and such a large percentage of students having limited language English proficiency, that the Hispanic population would have the highest achievement gap. But when you look at the data, while there are not as many black students at Calhoun High School, on the state assessments, they are consistently performing the lowest out of each subgroup. That's compared to the white population, the Hispanic population. So there's obviously, to me, there's a divide in what we're doing for our black population, and that needs to be something that needs to be discussed, and hopefully something that you can see from this data as well. That's going to be it as far as my data overview. Thank you.